Now you're introducing yourselves. All right. Hi, my name is Njoki Gatama, and I am one of the festival directors for Fear the Festival. This is the very first BIPOC horror festival to ever happen in Alberta, and also one of the very first festivals to be reaching people in Kenya, reaching people in the US, reaching people in Quebec, Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, of course. And this is really amazing. And now to my wonderful co-festival director.
Yes. So my name is Isabella Derilo. I am the other co-festival director. And basically, how this festival came together was basically Eunice and I are University of Alberta students, and I'm still in the BA program, and Eunice transferred to the BFA acting program. Yes, because she's a queen. But I remember it's just hard. It's hard. It's hard to make art in a post-secondary setting, and it's hard to make art in academia, in academic settings, because there's so much pressure, and there's a grade on it. There is someone else's name on it, that you are a part of it, so it doesn't ever really feel like it's yours. And so I think Fear the Fest, we just wanted art to not belong to anyone but the artist and their stories. So I guess that's kind of where this came into fruition, and we have 10 amazing artists who submitted. And yeah, it's fear, it's scary, it's personal, it's vulnerable. So yeah, that's basically where we're at. And we wanted to talk with y'all about your experiences with vulnerable work, with working with artists who maybe don't feel like they own their work or own their identity yet. And that's something we want to elevate. So yeah, I will pass the baton.
And to piggyback on that, oh my goodness, just the I guess being in an institution and feeling like you don't have the time and energy to actually make your own work outside of them is kind of crippling, because having many conversations about just where a lot of my friends are after graduating from these programs. They're like, I feel so lost. I feel like I didn't ever discover my own voice. I didn't ever discover what my untold story is. I never really took the risk to put that time and that spiritual, it takes a lot of your spirit and your soul. I didn't do that. I didn't do that investment because I was so strung on, let me get through this program, let me make this grades, let me go into my master's. And then you end up coming out of it and being like, what did I leave for myself, and what did I leave to my own imprint for me outside of this building? And now that I'm outside of it, I feel like it's like a tether of your soul is left with it. And I think going with Isabella, I think we want to make more spaces where there's that agency to fail and feel better, and not to be scared of failing and not think it's failure, but think it's just a draft of another draft of an extension of your work that you can keep working on. It never stops, So I guess going to y'all, where the mental health portion comes from, is that we made this a very personal project for everybody, and everyone went there. And because they went there, we owed it to them to make sure that they had tools and be able to reach people who can actually help them get to the point they need to get to emotionally to fulfill the story they want to do, and also just spread that information to other people who, we don't really talk about mental health as much in our arts community. And so here we are talking about it with y'all. We're so grateful to have you here. So I guess going into that, Lucy, Michelle, Lady, whoever wants to go first, talk to us about you, your name, your pronouns, and why why is art the way you want to express yourself? Why is this the medium in which you chose to tell your story?
So, I'll go ahead just so that I can also segue and introduce Michelle and Lady, because I kind of pulled them in around on this. So my name is Lucy Liu. I go by she, her. I'm artistic director of Thirdspace Playback Theatre Edmonton. I'm also an art therapist. So I come through this channel of the arts through therapy. Also because I wasn't as brave as you guys to just dive into the art. I had to do something practical doing my degree, but I love the work that I do. And so I think part of how I end up fulfilling my artistic voice was also process, right? I wasn't so focused on product. And so much of my own unpacking of my own artistic voice was about, I'm in process, and it's just art to make this process and to reflect. But with the Thirdspace Playback Theatre, we are a form of theatre that does improvised theatre. We listen to stories in the audience, and then we play them back, improvised on the spot. And it has a range of different expressions that people can explore. And in our group, we are particularly looking at BIPOC voices and trying to make spaces for people to share their stories and own their voice. And we're also trying to, because the creators of playback theater is practiced worldwide, it was created by a man named Jonathan Box, who was white, and his partner, Joe Salas, who's also white. And we are part of a movement of just trying to kind of take what's really awesome about the form and also start to critique and look at, well, how does a form that was originally created by white folks and make it our own, and make it what challenges the way we have our voice, because it's a very confessional model. We ask people to tell their stories, then we play it back. And then how do we as actors come into it? Like, how can we not be blank slates? So we're really challenging it within our own group, and we're always playing with different communities and just trying to see where their stories are at. And I invited, well, Michelle is in our company, and Lady has played with Thirdspace Playback way back when, but they both use playback in their own artistic work. So I just thought it would be such a great conversation to hear how they used it in their work, but also how it addressed mental health piece, just because playback is about hearing people's stories. And as a therapist, I work individually with people. We're in our office, we're doing our thing, but I always want to know, how can we help support the mental health of communities? There's something about witnessing art and being together and like feeling all together in it. And that's what the theater does for me, is that we get to witness our story together. We're not just closed away in our office trying to deal with our own issues, because really, as BIPOC people, our own issues are really collective issues, is really our collective experiences of oppression and discrimination, and how we can uplift each other. So I really love that theater can be this form that we uplift, and Lady's work and Michelle's work have really been about uplifting. So I just want to pass the intro to them, because I so love their work, and can't wait to have this conversation.
Awesome. Michelle, do you want to go or should I go?
You go, Lady.
Okay. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Isabella. Thank you, Eunice. And Michelle also. Can everybody hear me? You're good?
We can hear you nicely.
Yeah, so my name is Lady Vanessa. And I've been a theater practitioner since like the age of 5. Like I used to do like a lot of like community like theater work like when I was in Colombia, and then like kind of stopped that for a little bit, like when I like moved, and I was a refugee in like the lower part of Turtle Island in the United States. And then kind of like yeah, but I did a lot of art there too, and then like came like became a refugee in Canada, and yeah, it started continuing that. At the age of 12, I watched this movie called Maria Full of Grace, that is like this like Colombian movie that yeah, kind of like talks about like the drug trafficking industry from Colombia to the States. And but it was like very Hollywood-esque still. And I share this story like a lot because it was like a very like I realize now in my older years that it was like one of those like very grounding points. Like as a 12-year-old, like I was just like, oh, this movie like is talking about my people, and I'm not sure if they're telling the truth or not. And it looks like they've worked really hard and like well with like the people of my country, but is this like the actual story? And so like that was like a question that always like was there, right? Because it was still like I think it was still like it might have been like no, I think it was still like a Hollywood kind of like independent film or something. Like it was like not written by Colombian individuals. And so like since then, like there was something there that when people were like, oh, what do you want to do? Just like as a 12-year-old, I was like, oh, I want to make movies like about us, like about like to share like stories of like our people. And I didn't really know what that meant, right? Like I was just kind of like, yeah, like I just want to like I want us to share our own stories. And yeah, I went to school. Like I went to school for that. I went to high school. Like I went to basically the equivalent of like what Vic would be in Ottawa. I went to Canterbury High School, like an arts high school, went to theater, had a theater program, thought I was going to do film, went into film, too expensive, go back to theater, and like learned a lot. But I think that there's something that I like to resonate with, yeah, like what Isabella and Eunice, is that how is that how I say your name?
Oh, it's Eunice. Eunice. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Eunice. Okay. Thank you for correcting me.
It's okay.
And Isabella.
Yeah.
So yeah, something that both of you have sort of said, and I like to validate that, is in university especially. I feel like in high school there was like more room for that, but you know, university as an institution especially, which is ironic because that's where we spend most of the money. Like high school was free, but like university was like really expensive, and all of a sudden like it wasn't my voice anymore.
Mhm.
So that was like really, it's really weird. Like I feel like crying and laughing at the same time about it, because it's like sometimes like an insult to spirit, but then like you learn a lot, like you learn like so much. And that was definitely something that happened in university. And I went to university for a theater and development, like for community theater, and it still felt very much like like there's so much I learned, right? Like I learned about theater of the oppressed, like from Augusto Boal, who's like still a white Brazilian man, but like
Yes.
still like has like, oh, like it could see some great things, and like created like great method. And I learned so much about a lot of things that I'm putting into action today, but it took a lot of like unprogramming and like looking at the doctrination that had happened throughout those years. And even like the last play that I did that was very personal, and like was, I feel like, one of the reasons why Lucy kind of called me in, it was called Three Ladies. And that was like the time where I felt like I did like the community theater I've always like dreamed of and wanted to do. And it could be even better, like the process could be even better, but it was definitely, that process was about like unprogramming, like literally indigenizing, decolonizing like the rehearsal process of what that looks like, of this kind of very like rigid, okay, like from this time to this time we do this, and this is what we have planned. And I don't even know, right? Like but the group that I worked with also was like not the professional like artists, but they were, because like if you look at dancers and if you look at like Latinx, Afro Caribbean, indigenous, to Turtle Island, or like in other places, like if people look at like the very essence, like they've been dancing since the womb, right? So it's like what's a degree, especially when you're like actually connected and not like doctrinated, like so yeah, that was huge for me. But I would say that, yeah, like I'd like to just kind of echo a little bit of that, and of what you said about how sometimes like the stories are not really like for you, or like you're still doing something like for someone else, or there's just like there's just things there, right? And that still continues on even after, because of the programming that's like still in your head, and like in like how you've done it. But it's important to kind of know that, so that you sort of are able to use those tools like for your advantage, right? For the advantage of like your community and like the stories that you're sharing. But maybe maybe like overlooking sometimes how much our desire also to people please, and to like ask for validation from still the same sort of like institutions that kind of like we're like, oh, but we're doing it this way, and there's like this like want to be like, no, like I'm gonna do it my way and it's gonna be great, and like and all these things. But there's like this giant, there can be this giant thing still like in your subconscious that's like, is it okay, like did I do it, like, and this anxiety about doing something not conventional, and this like pull and all these things. Three Ladies was that for me, but it takes a while to get there. And not just that, but I ask myself, what is the balance, and if there needs to be a balance, at least in my life, of holding these stories in spaces that weren't meant to do that weren't meant to I guess, what's the word, like weren't meant to hold our process in the ways in which we want to, because and not because they don't want to, but because it's not like the foundation, right? So it's like, what's the balance when you are creating a foundation and a space like somewhere else, and you're creating that from like actually what you know, and trying your best not to do it in this like sort of colonial way, and then like, but you still bring it into a place that somewhat is still a colonial setting. Like, what is that? And then like having to kind of mold yourself and like sometimes shrink yourself, sometimes really fight, sometimes really be like, whoo, I gotta look at like everything like really wide, if I'm really going to like try to attempt this. It's like, it's really hard to do. It's not something that I feel like it's easy. So yeah, I think that's just like what I want to share. Maybe I overshared, I don't know, but yeah, I think that's something I kind of wanted to share in terms of like some of my process, and sort of echoing what you've been saying.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Oh my
Absolutely,
goodness.
we'll definitely.
I'm literally
dig into
taking
that.
notes in my mind. I should be writing notes, because a lot of points you made, I would like to expand on that later in the discussion with everyone. Oh my goodness, about colonial spaces, and then performing in colonial spaces, and how certain processes you do in different spaces affects the way you're telling your stories. And that's
Yes, yes. I would
today.
like to also add on to that, just before we move on to introducing Michelle, just like how Eunice and I, we kind of just like took this upon us, and we thought like, now that like COVID is a thing and will be a thing, how we can do this, how we can, indigenize, decolonize these spaces online.
Yeah.
And like right now, like we need that more than ever, to know that like there's hope and that we're here. And that is something Eunice and I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves of being like, oh, we're not as good as XYZ. Oh, our editing isn't as good as XYZ. Our, marketing isn't as good as XYZ. But it's like, who put those in place? Who put, these marketing standards of like, who's watching our stories, who's clicking on this link, who's following us? It's like, it takes away from the agency of telling and of wanting to tell, because it's like, there's all these other things in the way that just like, it is really hard. It's so super hard and it's draining. So yeah, I would love to get into that a little bit more later. So thank you for sharing that. That resonated with me completely. So thank you, lady.
And also being looked as a woman, and that's a whole nother conversation. Working with men who automatically, oh my gosh, we'll get into that. That's why I had my first question before. That's another thing. That's that other power dynamic. But Michelle, please go ahead, take the floor.
Start off with a quote. We have to reclaim the stories that are full of joy and sorrow, that have life in them, so we can pass them on to the generations. Open up to hear each other's tell our stories. We're not connecting to our bodies. We're not connecting to our bodies to hear the stories of those who came before us. Opening up to the wisdom and the guidance of our elders and ancestors as they share their stories. This is the time. No, let me repeat it. This is the time to connect, to listen, to honor ourselves and the healing that lives within all of us. That's it. My name is Michelle Buckle, and I'm a psychologist. I'm a drama therapist. I'm a researcher. I'm a student. I'm an educator. I'm a lover. I'm a mother. I'm a friend. I'm a playbacker. I'm a theater artist. And I am honored to be here with my sisters. Look at the United Nations. Look at the beautiful women. Forget our accolades. Look at us sitting here today, having tea, talking about our cultural foods, looking at each other and just saying the countries we came from, the opportunities each of us received from our parents and their parents and their parents. And that's the deep arts that live within each of us. And that's what binds us here today, that we're listening to ladies speak and just be moved by, the knowledge and the beauty that you have, and to connect and say, yes, we are here in a colonized world, trying to be and having to I call it almost like an extroversion that happens. Like we almost have to find ways of finding out who we are, because what we are in does not look like us. So on November the 10th, I am 50 years old. And I sat here looking at these beautiful young women, and I said, I am now the elder. I never wanted to believe it. I'm the elder. And I'm excited when I look at you beautiful beings. I'm excited that you're leading. You opened up this opportunity to use the arts as this platform, as a festival, to reach the other people in the generations here and to come. So here we are. They say, an African proverb, if we do not initiate the youth into the village, they will burn it down to keep its warmth. I'm going to look at that phrase differently today, and I'm going to say, all of us here, including this festival, you have decided to use the festival, to use your platforms to burn it down. You're saying, look at me. We deserve to have a voice. We deserve to have a story. And if you don't give us the space for it, we're creating it ourselves. That's what you each said, right?
Yeah.
We're not waiting. We're not going to wait for you to give us the key in order to open the door.
No.
No.
We're going to tell our own stories. We're going to do it. So at 50 years old, I heard you girls, because I'm back in university, decided to do my PhD. What the heck am I thinking? Sorry, my education doctor. I don't know what I was thinking, but I'm back now at U of A, right next door to you guys, and I'm doing my education, and I'm doing my thesis in looking at using arts-based research as the avenue to let youth, Black youth, who are co-victims of homicide, explore their lived experiences. So as a psychologist and as a drama therapist and as an artist, I've decided, how do I create a avenue using therapy, my art practice, to get youth to tell their stories, whatever that story is, being a co-victim, whatever it is that comes to their heart. But I decided to do it myself, because when I looked around, I said, people are telling my story. And I started to say, okay, that's my story. Okay, you want me to come to university and do it? You do? Okay, you do it? Okay. And I did it. And now I came back saying, hell no, no, I'm doing it my way. Frank Sinatra sang about it. But in the way of my story, not disrespecting education, right? But looking at, how do I help youth? Well, I am a co-victim of homicide. My nephew Julian was murdered in 2002, 17 bullets shot into him. And to this day, it hasn't been solved. So I'm seeing that his story, he has no presence on internet. So he's been erased. So I am saying, hell no, I will not be erased. I will not let somebody untell my story or not tell my story. So I want to create my story. So I decided I'm going to use my own story of using drama and theater processes, even like playback, to look at what my story could have been, parts of what it is, generationally, and to present it and to use playback as a way to get the audience to connect to my story and to perhaps retell it with me, which is different than for me or about me, but with me by connecting their own story. And Lucy's been amazing in helping us, teaching us, taking the skills she has learned through her years of experience at a specific method such as playback to actually be able to get the audience to feel that they are part of the collective. So the healing is not just mine. The making changes isn't just mine, but it's a group one, because then it helps the individual. So that's just a little bit of my story, and I am grateful that I have the opportunity to share it and be here with you as your elder. Sorry, I get passionate.
Thank you.
Just like you, lady, I get passionate.
And we're here for it. We are here for it. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you. I think I will hold that within me till like forever. I think that really, I don't know, reached me deep. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. So, my body is just like, you just feel that buzz. You're just like, oh my gosh, okay, we're getting in, we're getting there. We're in there. We're in it together right now. I would love to just start with like talking about this conversation, but I want to like touch on something Michelle brought up, which is you talked about, okay, I'm sharing my story, I'm telling my story, I'm putting it in, I'm producing this work, and then them telling you how to do it. And I guess we can revert back, but I wanted to talk about how can we approach like producing and starting telling your story in order to share it for the public in a way that you can uphold the honesty and the integrity of it without feeling as though you are repressing or you're withholding back because you're out of fear, because I feel a lot of it's fear to actually be brave enough to talk about your maybe experiences as a refugee, or maybe your experiences with being a witness, or being a family member who has someone who has with homicide. Like how do we approach these sensitive topics in such an art form? And I guess this is a very long-winded conversation. And then Thirdspace, how does Thirdspace facilitate that for artists? I guess this is a question for Lucy or Michelle, and then Lady to talk about how that was for you to be doing the process that Thirdspace has created.
Because I like the word co-victim. And I don't know if, Michelle, you want to elaborate on that, but I think that word, I don't know, it's stuck with me. So I think,
Because when I think of co-victim, I think we're all co-victims in all sorts of ways.
Wow.
And like when I think of the pain that I take from, like if I would tell you my family's life story, you would be like, wow, how is it that you're such a joyous human being? How is it that you still have the heart to be kind and be empathetic? And it's like, well, what we went through it together as a community, as a family. What the stab wound that my brother has, that was my stab wound in my ribs. Any pain that was inflicted in my family, that was a pain that was inflicted in my body.
Yes.
I carried it. I carry it still today. And my piece that I wrote was me saying that, okay, I may have carried it, but I don't have to keep carrying the traumas of others. I need to be able to let that go, because I'm not going to be able to ever hear my own voice and think it's mine. And I would love for you to, I would love for you to talk about what being a COVID, because we all are, and how do we heal from that, and then also not just keep internalizing other people's traumas in your body all the time. How do you expel that?
Wow.
How do we expel that?
Wow.
Because I feel like I'm creating more traumas out of other people's.
How do you expel that? How do you expel? That's Lucy, come talk to us.
Oh my gosh.
Expulsion.
you know, as a therapist, I had this experience of an artist who came to me and said, I think I need therapy. She said, and I said, why? She's like, I get so angry when people get racist. And I said, you don't need therapy. Like, it's not your problem. And she just laughed, because she was like, oh, I thought it was my problem because I was always so angry. And I was like, no, that's telling us that there's a problem out there, not in here. And I think that's what happens with us. We're always saying it's our problem. It's our thing that we're carrying, right?
Yes.
I don't know. I also had my own journey of carrying my family's story. And I think it's growth. And I'm really actually happy for Michelle to name this elder role that you're playing, is that we're always in our cohorts, right? We're always with our people of our age, and we're all developmentally that age and trying to figure things out. But that's not how villages work. We need people who process this, who figured out how to, what word do you use, to expel story? We need people who've done it before to learn it. Like, how do you expect to know how to do this? You're just someone growing up and taking it all in. But anyways, sometimes our villages are broken, and sometimes our families are hurt, and so they don't actually have those like methods. And I think getting back to this colonial things we've learned in school is sometimes it doesn't feel like our story, but sometimes we can just pull from those methods and hopefully make our own. But we pull from those methods to do that healing work. And I think I want to pass this on to like our Michelle and Lady because they've done this deeply with their stories, is how do we tell our story? I think metaphor is a really powerful form. It grows with us over time. Saying the details of what happened is just recounting the trauma, right? Mm-hmm. But when we hold it in the metaphor, and that's why art is so powerful, is that the metaphor can help us buffer the feelings that we're still processing. So we have that metaphor, we have a story that we're creating, and it's related to where we're coming from, but because we have that buffer, it's not as painful as reliving it. And that's what art does, is we have buffers until we get closer to be able to tell our story. And I think that's what playback does. We try to ground it in the metaphor and relate it to the story. And then I think over time too, when stories get placed, the metaphor grows until we can really face our fears. We can really face all the dark reality of what it is. But that's just one way. That's one way that I think we can approach our stories that have heaviness to it. Yeah.
Can I jump in there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, just kind of like echoing what Michelle was saying. I'm so glad that you have like also like fully embraced and taken on the role of an elder. Like I am like, okay, like when I call upon my elders in my community now, I'm like, okay, like let me call Michelle, like which like I have to work some things out in my mind about what titles mean to me, because like I'm like, well, why now only am I gonna reach Michelle? So I think what Lucy was saying is important. The metaphor, what I think the metaphor is so great at is that the metaphor, I feel like, can even sometimes get even like more specific into what the root is, without the gory details of something, or like you can have those gory details, but because you have the metaphor, then the metaphor itself is the message, is like actually like what's like the like like the like like that I can understand that like spiritually now instead of just physically, like in the material world. Like the metaphor, I feel like is like what kind of like that channel of connection, and like I feel like that's kind of like what I think like that's what the artist is, right? Like that's what the role of artists are in a community, which is I'm like, in a colonial setting, like it's like you don't actually appreciate that, but the artists are the healers in like in our communities, like like in our indigeneity, like that, like they're the healers, they're the ones with the message, and like how, and like this is something I want to give credit to my friend Merlin, who was talking about this, because this is like her direct words, but yeah, she was talking about the artists being the healers, and like they are the ones that are just like in direct communication with creator, and like what is then like the message, like how clear can you make the message be? And when she said that, like I was like, yes, like that is what I've attempted to do. So like Namibia, Windhoek, Namibia was like what the land that birthed poet in me. So after I like left university, like that was like the thing that I did. I was like, okay, cool, like I know how to be an actor now, and like I know how to play this role like over here and do this and that, but like what about like what about like my story, or what about like learning and giving tools to people to share their stories? Like what does that look like, and what does that look like in like an organic way? And spoken word became this like thing that I was like, okay, let me study and like let me like gather up another tool, because spoken word is all about the metaphor. It's all about it's all about that. If people actually want to look at it in that way, if people are like there not for the points but actually like to get to the point. And so for example, Eunice, yes, okay, Eunice, you talked about, you know, like not holding on to people's to people's trauma, or like your family story, in a way. Like you do hold that, but it's like, how can you hold that and still know that that's like a voice like over here, and like to get to your own voice? And Three Ladies was like that, because I think as people that have like, for myself, for example, like someone that has like gone through like intergenerational like heavy trauma, it's been like, yeah, like I've just been like, what's going on? Like I feel like I'm a pretty decent human being, like I feel like I'm a good human being, and I'm making mistakes here, and hurting people around me, like mainly, like for me it's like mainly been through my sexual abuse, but like, yeah, like I'm like, I'm really hurting like those around me, I'm hurting my relationships, I'm hurting like myself in some ways, but I'm just not aware of like what's going on, and like, or like how I'm doing this, or like I'm getting triggered, and like my triggers are like reacting in these like very like violent ways, like that, like I don't feel like are a part of me. Like I don't feel like I'm a violent and like scary human being, but these things are coming out of me, and it's like freaking me out, and I like require some healing. And like I did some shadow work with my friend Priscilla. Like I started getting into like the playback theater with Lucy. I called Lucy in on this project, so I was like, you're an art therapist, like I could use some help. And I started looking at like the wounded inner child in us, right? Like from this genocide that has happened, and that continues to happen. Some people are closer to like being the direct targets of the genocide, and then some people are like a little bit, you know, like I'm like the light-skinned version of like being like cool, like I see my cousins out there, I see what like has been done to me, and like being able to position yourself like into that. So the wounded inner child, right? Like what was like the first time that like you were like, oh, like my your nervous system reacted in a certain way as a child because like something happened, or someone did something, or like the outside. You know, like I come from like a place like of like civil war, which there's nothing civil about civil war, but something happened, or you experienced something, you saw something as a child that all of a sudden shifted your reality of what safety and what like being a human and what being like a spiritual being. I'm also going to quote my friend Yusi, being a spiritual being, having a human experience. And so like I like Three Ladies was really looking at that, looking at the inner child, looking at then like who Lady is in this body with the inner child. And then doing the shadow work that I did with my friend and mentor Priscilla, who Priscilla like did shadow work with me, like did like basically what you would kind of like talk about as like like ayahuasca, but like the sober version of it, through like many months, like many months of like a lot of like talking, a lot of like facing oneself. But shadow work was like ancestral work as well. And so there was like, for Three Ladies, there was like Lady Clown, Lady, and Lady Shadow. And Lady Shadow was like all the voices that I've like that have been birthed in myself like through trauma and through like yeah, like mainly through trauma. So there was like these 5 voices. Now there's 6. Now I've identified another one. They're just gonna keep like being identified, and like I'll be like, yeah, I'll create more plays about this because people should know. It's like my own personal like research. Like I'm like, did my soul choose this? Okay, cool. But yeah, the shadows was like grief, which like the healed version of that is faith. Enabler, which like is like the codependent in denial sort of deal, which is the interdependent, is the healed version of that. Liar, which is integrity, is the healed version of that. Jealousy, which is like freedom. And then like guilt, which is like self-esteem. And I won't go into detail about my direct family. So in Eunice, you were talking about your family and like how you went through things together. Like that's also what we did. And then like part of it was like it was healing, and then part of it's still traumatic. Like part of it I'm like, and I need a lot of space from y'all so I can do some healing over there. I'll be the lone wolf for a second because I gotta look at this thing from the outside. But those shadows, like the thing is that sometimes you can go away, but those shadows are still there. Like those voices are still there, right? Like that voice that's like telling you you're not good enough, that's grief. And like where does that come from? And that might be more like that might be deeper than what your voice is. Like that might be like you know, like how many great grandmas ago was she told she wasn't good enough, in how, in whichever way that happened, and sometimes really brutally. And so like understanding that and understanding those voices and being able to identify those voices in your family members makes you also kind of be like, okay, there's like like I'm gonna use the word crazy even though like it's not like, you know, proper, but like I'll just use it. But yeah, like I have felt kind of crazy, like because like I feel like these shadows have like literally like embodied me. Like I've like taken on these roles, like this thing, and I'm not aware of it. Like Lady has not been like aware that I'm like embodying grief or like embodying jealousy or embodying liar, embodying guilt. And it's like it becomes like the actual voice. Like I'm like I don't think that's like what my spirit like thinks or how like it communicates, but this wounded side of me is really communicating with me and to others in this way based on this trigger thing that I haven't been able to self-regulate on or even observe. So let me like look at this. And like honestly, I wish y'all had seen like my freaking like my walls were like sticky notes. Like I was like what's going on, let me share. Like I thought I was just doing like a theater show, but like this has been like for me like and Cass Mega, who was like a big collaborating partner, and still is a big collaborating partner for Three Ladies, was like, this is a method. Like Three Ladies is a method. And you're creating a method. And I was like, I like the part of me was like, well, that's cool, but like yes, like I created a method, y'all.
Yes.
I'm creating a method that I feel like has like been really helping me, like really helping me in my healing, because being able to identify, okay, like what's that voice, and like is that actually my mother's voice, is that actually like my uncle's voice, is that my sister's voice, is that my auntie's voice, like what are those voices, how do they manifest in grief, like which different voices in our families like talk in that way. Being able to identify that makes you then ask yourself, which questions are so sacred, makes you ask yourself, well, what do I really think about that in this scenario? I know this is the thought, and this is often the way the story goes in this way, because it's gone like this, like throughout some generations. What do I think? What do I think about this in this way? And I can learn from past experiences, because like what Michelle said about like sharing and honoring the stories of our ancestors and how much like and not just our ancestors but like our elders, like my great grandmother is still alive, like my great like aunties are still alive. I met my great grandmother until the age of 7. So it's like those stories that came before and like now what we're gonna share like to come like after. But it's like, how do we honor that? How do we honor the experience as well as the trauma? Like, how do we honor like when they're like, hey, you're in danger, and it's because of experience. It's because they're like, yeah, like I've been there before and you're in danger, like do something about it. Or how is it like you're in danger and then me ask myself, well, what does danger like look like, and how can I like, and am I really in danger in this moment, or am I thinking that I'm in danger based on either the experience of my ancestors or my own experience? This happens to me a lot, like especially like in relationships with anybody, friendships, romantic relationships, everything. Like I'm like, oh, am I in danger? Like am I, like and that has to be like a question that I ask myself often. But then like I have to like look like inside. But that shadow still, like you can't just like ignore that. Like you still have to like listen to the shadow and be able to soothe the shadow to like transition into like the healed version of that, which is faith, right? Like when grief is telling you you're in danger, like what is it? What is your alignment? Even if you are, to be like, okay, I'm in danger, but like I have faith that like I can come out of this, and like I'm also okay, and we're gonna be fine, and we're gonna transition the narrative, and we're gonna transition the story, because the future generation like deserves that. And yeah, I think that's like what I have.
Yeah.
Can I just make, oh my gosh, my mind is just like, there. I had to mute myself because I was gonna keep being like, yes, 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 my soul, yes, yes, yeah. Oh my! I was like, no, you put yourself on mute. It's not. This is not a sermon. You're not here in the back pews. You know what I mean? Being the auntie who's just like, hallelujah, woo, and then just jumping about. Like I was about to just get up on my feet. I did not want to sit down. What you talked about. You mentioned a lot about what rituals are, and I've been learning about rituals with David Kennedy. Shout out to David Kennedy. I appreciate you if you see this. David Kennedy process of devised work in improvisational theater is rituals. Create rituals, and within these rituals, you find out a process that works for you to get in the work and out the work. And I think with every artist, we're all trying to heal our inner child. Like our inner child is crying. I think that's why we're all in it. It's because like our inner child is like, I need you to notice me. I need you to see me. I am crying. I am bleeding. I need you to do something. And we go into art because it's like, that is where we can play. That is where we can find joy again. That is where we can process our thoughts. And what you talked about, your thoughts that are not your thoughts, but are inherited. When you said inherited perspectives and beliefs and ideas, and then you realize, and there's a sense of shame that goes along when you abandon it, when you be like, this is not me anymore. But it's like, it feels isolating because it's like, but that's what my community believes, but I don't believe that anymore. Then where do I belong if now I feel like, oh, I feel separate from this now? And it's that like finding that ritual to be like, okay, this is my process, this is my thought, this is my voice, this is my being, connecting and healing and being like, you know what, inner child, I see you, and I'm actually going to do something about it. I'm not gonna keep letting you, I'm not gonna keep beating you down further and further, because I didn't realize that my triggers, and you mentioned triggers, okay, oh my goodness, triggers. Lucy, Michelle, Isabella, please talk about your ritual process and like triggers and everything, because triggers, when you notice what your triggers are, it's like when you see something in someone else and you're like, I don't like that. Oh, it's because it's a trigger in you, or at least I internalize. I'm like, oh, I don't like that about that person because I kind of in some ways see a quality of myself in them, and that makes me uncomfortable. You know, or just the way someone being reactionary because you may have this habit that you kind of got from somewhere else, and then you're quick to automatically react that way because that's a natural instinct, because maybe your mom, when she talked to you, and how her mom talked to her mom, and how her mom talked to her mom, and the way they talk to each other talk to you, and now the way you talk to other women and the way you talk to other girls is the same way. And even the way I let men treat me, whew, I don't even want to go into that.
There's
But how
so much pressure.
So much pressure.
There's so much pressure.
Kikuyu woman. Oh my goodness. Kikuyu women, we are strong, and we let our men know we're the boss. And it's hard being in a very Western system that puts this patriarchy, and a system in which in our tradition the women are like the leaders, we are the givers, we're the healers, we are the ones who are like, we're like literally the foundation. Though are the men as well, but like you can tell that the woman is really the one leading. And it's like dismantling, and it's like being dismantled by that and being told you must be small, you must not take as much space. And that who in my own theatrical process, just even talking to a male director and telling him and speaking being like, okay, this is my choice that I made, and then explaining and talking about them, but not being like as if they're like, this is not a good choice, and being like, okay, let's talk about that, versus me being like, oh, okay, yeah. You know what I mean? Actually being able to have holding those conversations and taking up space. So Isabella, Lee, I'm gonna keep going.
I don't want to talk about that too, because like for me personally, I struggle with borderline personality disorder. So being an artist is what really heals me, but it's terrifying. It's so terrifying, and I'm not strong enough, and I'm learning to be. I'm not strong enough to stand on stage and tell my story. I'm not strong enough to, I mean, I call myself a playwright, but I haven't written in 2 years because it's like I'm scared to do this work. I'm scared to write down everything I'm feeling because it's so much pressure of like, okay, I have to do this for my mother, I have to do this for my dad, I have to do this for my grandparents, I have to, but then it's like that halts me. It comes to a stop where it's like, I can't break the threshold because every moment I am triggered, or I don't know my triggers. And it's the same thing of like what you were saying, lady, of like, I don't like this anger, I don't like this violence. And I know that it's like what you said, Lucy, of like, this isn't my problem, but it's all consuming. So it makes it feel like this is me and this is my problem. But it's like, no, you know, my mother, you know, she was raised by my Lolo, and then he, you know, my grandma left her, and it's just like, it's cyclical. This nature of trying to isolate and alienate the pain and erase it. And I don't know if like I have the tools in the setting that I am to make work that feels good and to make work that's not for anyone else but me. But is that selfish? You know, like it's something that I don't know. I'm trying to be an artist, but it feels like something's holding me back. And I don't know if it's triggers, if it's trauma, if it's like this mental illness, and I like to blame it on that. But you know, these are things that like I want to break through, but it's terrifying, right? It's so scary. And how can you facilitate that, like especially like being alone, being anxious, and being like, I don't know, being a writer, being, you know, thinking that you have to do it yourself. And I think that is really like colonial, like you have to do it yourself. Like we're not looking at, you know, the people around us. We're looking too inward. And I don't know if if that's a bad thing, if that's a good thing. I don't know if y'all want to like talk on that of like, who can you look to then if you can't look for yourself or you can't find others?
Hmm.
You know?
Wow, powerful, powerful. Who can we look to? You know, I think about the question on, you know, the triggers, and I think of how playback has played the role of, you know, being able to externalize the internal. So using images and metaphor, we can help to extract or purge or let out or release those pieces of ourselves that we may want to reshape, or the pieces of ourselves that we may want to see differently. So when the audience shares their story, Lucy is the facilitator, or as the you know, story keeper, as I like to call her, or in playback they say the conductor, replays back to the audience member who decides to share their story. Is this what you said? And when the audience member and Lucy unite, or when they, I think of when there's a connection that happens between her, she becomes, Lucy, the conduit that connects to us as the playbackers, and then we to the audience. And from that, we the playbackers replay using our bodies the images that might be painful, the images that might be joyful. And we use metaphor, we use, well, let me tell you again, music, singing. We have an amazing musician who doesn't even use the verbal to communicate in how he plays story. And then together, there's the unity, there's the healthy healing, there's the collective holding. And we embody it. Powerful stuff, the arts. That's why they say an image is worth 1,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
I want to speak to this image worth 1,000 words and maybe kind of respond to what you were talking about, Isabella, about the fear around coming to your story. And I think the holding back when you don't want to tell your story, you know, kind of what Lady was saying is there's trauma response, right? Your fear protects you. So we don't also want to shame that fear. That fear took care of you when it needed when you were a young person. And so I think in therapy and in arts, there's a parallel creation process, right? Mm-hmm. I don't say to people, tell me your story right now and just go do it. You know, like that doesn't feel gentle, doesn't feel kind to that little person that got hurt. Because that's who I'm speaking to when we're in our work, right? And I think the same thing about telling a story, your story. You kind of, my son came down, so I had to come, you know, I have to come down to his level, right? And I have to talk to him in his words and what he can understand. I think it's so much the inner child in you and your artist, is you're not going to ask your child from your university level age and say, tell me an academic story about your childhood, right? You're going to like come to the child where they're at and ask them, what happened? What's going on? And you know, when you're young, you can't say all the words that happened. You don't really understand. You just know I was hurt, or not even, you might not even know the words. You just have the feeling. Someone went to my face. And I think that's where art can start making its headway, is that we don't need to, if you guys got to see Lady's show, there was like detail, but then there was metaphor and there was layers and there was like, and I think Lady could speak more to that process too, is that you enter where you're capable. Like, you're not going to push yourself. You're going to go to your edge, but you don't want to go jumping off the edge. That's terrible. Right. You want to go to your edge as an artist, but you want to go gentle. And so sometimes your first initial work is not going to be the full-fledged story, but it'll be the edge. Because that's where you can go right now. And then that's authentic to you. But what we sometimes learn in school or whatnot is play someone else's story. I remember being in theater and they made me do this dining room story about white people eating around a dining room. And I was like, I don't even have a dining room in my house. Like, I don't even identify. And so sometimes you're told to make these stories that you don't identify, but you want to go to that edge where you're like, where do I identify? What aspect can I identify? Where's the safe place for me to explore fear? You're finding that zone for you where you can write from there or create artwork from there. And then your edge with each piece that you make. And I feel like in playback, I get a chance to do that edge all the time, because every person's story that gives me material to work with, I'm working on my edge, and that they gift me with their story, and I get to work on my edge on sharing that story. And each creation that you make pushes that edge to the point where you feel like, okay, now I can tell the story the way that it can fully come out. Does that feel like it resonates in some way?
Absolutely.
Can you go further into, like, okay, you talked about this edge, and I know Michelle has a thought. Michelle, do you want to go with your thought first before I ask the question to Lucy, or? I can't hear you.
Go ahead.
Okay. So you talked about we go with our edge because that's where we're comfortable. It's where where we've at least processed it a bit. Can you talk further about how do you facilitate, and this is one of our questions, how do you facilitate collective healing while setting boundaries of your own in the work, and also you as the person facilitating or being the, I guess I would say, like the guide, or at least maybe just the gentle hand, just to lead them into it? How does that work?
Yeah, I'll speak for myself and let everyone else speak just for the edge piece. Is like, so we try to, in our work, we try to create spaces about talking about things that are challenging for us, you know. So we had shows on reconciliation, on you know, we did a playback from Michelle's show about what was experience about seeing us play about co-victims of violence and murder. So we're not going to go to that point of like, what does it feel like to feel that way? We're going to look at the edge of that, going, we're going to approach the story. What's that feel like? We're going to talk about the approach. So it's almost like you do this in therapy too, is like, if I can't talk about the thing that really, really is painful, I'm going to go a little bit further away going, okay, we're going to talk about this story. Or Isabel's like, we want to tell your story, but what's hard about that? So we're not talking about the story itself, but we're talking about the process around it, right? And then that's where we kind of get into, oh, well, I'm scared, and I don't know if people are going to like it, or I don't know if I can tell it, I don't know if I can be authentic to it. Then we kind of process everything around the actual nugget. That's the edge. And then once you kind of process that, well, you understood the edge, and then you can get a little further, and then you can actually get closer to, you know, the nugget. And you might spend a lot of time in that edge or what's all the way around it, but it's still a thread that goes to that nugget. It's just, you know, this is where we can talk a little bit, we can process, and we can make some embodiment and art around, or unfinished work, you know. That's what I mean about the edge. Does that resonate with you guys, Michelle and Lady, in your work? Michelle, you got your mic on? Your headphones?
We can't hear you.
Hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, that's weird. Okay, you can hear me?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I was listening to you, Lucy, and I was kind of going into another world. And my apologies, because that's what we do in theater. We go into another world, and the world that she led me into was the idea of me understanding my process, that I chose to use a therapeutic process to enter the art, to be able to tell something so vulnerable. And the process I chose to use was storytelling. And the way I could go in, Lucy, was I could go in by looking at a story of folklore, an African fairy tale, like African Caribbean folklore, a Nancy. And that story was about a Nancy with Tiger. And when you hear the story, it's about Tiger, getting the spider Anansi, which is spider in Ghana, to capture Snake. And in the end, the way the story goes is, Snake gets, tricked out of his own tricks, and he ends up getting captured. But then again, Nancy in the end wants to release the snake, versus being a capturer, an oppressor, having oppressed, to want to oppress back, and this fight with my own trauma around the historical trauma, the intergenerational trauma, the transgenerational trauma, and the transcending trauma. And that lives within, but sometimes I can't see. So Lucy, when you talked about that, story helped me to extract that, to look at that, to examine it, and to not want to look at it, and then to see and feel so raw that I have to baby her, like you said, Lucy, that inner child, right? And then how do you do that, while remaining on the edge? Because it's kind of like you don't want to fall in, because there's this close, right? It's Sankofa. So to go get back was lost, stolen, forgotten. You have to go to the edge, because you go into this abyss that you just go in very slightly to capture it before you are caught. So I think about that dance we do in playback of going to the edge, Lucy, that I feel reflects my own life of using different methods of theater and drama to help me go to that edge. There's the edge of tolerance, hyperarousal, hypoarousal, right down here, and hyperarousal. You're high up here, low down here. So the idea is that when you go into hyperarousal, above this hand, you go out of your window of tolerance. But this piece here, this window of tolerance here, this is the piece in which we say, yes, we can handle things. When we don't handle things, we go into almost like a feigned death, like a frozen. And when we go out of our window of tolerance, we go into this hyperarousal, and the limbic systems and the amygdala, it's just going. But when we're in the middle, we're okay, but sometimes we have to play the edges, also very slightly. And without falling in those edges, what do we use? And for me, it's the arts. It's just the dance.
Yeah.
So it's
Like,
like this thing, I see you, lady. I just have to say this because I see you. I see you, sweetie. I actually see you. I want you to hear that. I see you, Eunice. Isabella, girl, I see you.
mm,
Lucy, I see. I've been seen. I saw you, right? And it's along that edge there in which we get to see each other and we almost engage in that dance. So when Lady, you went like this, it reminded me of dancing. So we use our art and we write. You write, Isabella, you wrote this. You use a very oral form to write this with your sister Eunice.
mm,
You may not have used the written, creative, handwritten that's typical and traditional, but you write this.
mm-hmm,
So each of us take the hand of the audience member, the one who's watching. We kind of slightly do this dance with them along the edges.
mm,
And that's what we do with each other today. Using the arts, this form of the art, which you both wrote.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's huge. Manifesting is writing, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
You talked about the spider, and the spider has been a giant teacher and a metaphor for me for the past maybe month and a half. Like, yeah, she's just been appearing, and like some of her messages have been appearing. So like hmm, I was called a spider recently by someone that I love very much, and I like, there was something about it that was like, oh, like, I don't know. I think because like someone else like in the past has described themselves as a spider, but like in this kind of weird way where they're just like, oh, like I'm this sort of spider, and I'll just kind of like look at my prey and then like eventually like get to them so I can like capture. And so I always looked at the spider as like this kind of like evil, right? Like this kind of like evil sort of like animal or spirit animal. And recently, so I've been like doing so it's interesting that we're like writing things into existence, because I've been doing a giving life course, like a doula giving life course. And I've been like really on this search for recently about the portal of life and death, and like the ancestral ceremony and meaning of that, and like how that like we may or may not have access to our immediate tribe, or even the name of it, like or tribes. Like I come from many, like I'm mixed, I come from many different tribes. So I may or may not have like direct access to some, but like I still have access to knowledge just based on like my elders and like my family members, and then like my ancestral wisdom, right? My DNA that has been like, you should read this book, you should like do this research, you should take this particular course with this particular person who's like, you're being called to go, you should go to Lucy and Michelle and like learn playback theater, and like why them in particular, right? Like and it's like it's spirit like actually like guiding you, right? Like that is like when we're talking about the wounded child, or when we're talking about the inner child, and we're talking about remothering that inner child. It's like actually like, you know what Eunice, like we were saying about like which voice is mine, right? Like what's your intuition, and can you understand that your intuition sometimes is weaved has been tailored through trauma, and then what's like your true intuition, right? Which is the important part about doing the shadow work, and the metaphor and the dance that we were talking about. Because for example, in the theater piece that I did, like I had 5 dancers be Lady Shadow, right? Like be their own individual, like what I told you about grief and stuff. I also forgot to mention that Nasra Adam was the person that who was my director and like co-creator in many ways of Three Ladies and the method itself. And they were the ones that came up, like I came to them with like the wounded versions of these shadows. I was like, so I think I figured out the shadows, here they are. And then they were like, cool, we're gonna come up with like their intuition was like, we're gonna come up with the healed version of that, because like, cool, you've identified them, and what next? Like, and what do you do now? How do you transform? How do you rewrite the story? Sorry, the story, oh yeah, okay, sorry, I'm just gonna like mention my train of thought. I'm just gonna mention some things also, Lucy and Michelle, you've both talked about, which is like tools, right? Like what kind of tools you use to go over the edge, and then I'll talk about the spider. But the tools, right? Like I'm so interested in tools and culture and how to like ground the truth in that. So like clown like has been something I've loved. Like my inner child loves clown, like loves clowns, just like loves learning about them, loves the red nose, loves like the whole thing. It's like actual therapy. Like if you actually like ever do just like are like I can't afford therapy, go and get yourself a clown course. Like go and do some clowning, because clowning, like there was one, I can't remember the quote. I took a course with Morgan, can't remember her last name, but she's this great clown, like and she did this course, and there was a quote, something like where like the clown like the clown has no experience, but like reacts like from the heart. It was something like that. But it was like, so like everything that the clown does, like it's so relatable, because like Mr. Bean, for example, is a clown, right? Like Mr. Bean will just be like, these walls need painting. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a bunch of newspaper on the floor. Like it's like what's your heart song telling you in that moment? Like experience would be like, okay, like I'll just roll, you know, like this thing, like this is like how I've been taught, this is my experience. For him, he's like, I have no experience, right? Clowns have no experience. And so they're like, we're just gonna do this a different way. So Mr. Bean's just like, I'm just gonna put a bunch of like newspapers on the floor, and then I'm gonna put like a little bomb, like a paint bomb, and I'm gonna get out of the room as fast as I can, so that like these walls and like all the furniture, I'll put newspaper all over it. And it's hilarious, right? Like these are the things that like make us laugh, because like our inner child is just like, oh yes, like probably like I would have thought of that, but someone would have been like, no, that's dumb. And then like take our magic like away, like slowly, right? Like imagination away slowly. And this is like why like clown is just like, oh, it's so juicy, because it's just like, yes, like all the things that you like want to do, like Lady Clown was my inner child, right? And that was the tool for that. Like clowning was the tool for that, and it allowed me as Lady to be like, you know what, when I have this red nose, I can do whatever I want, and like it's valid. Like it is like, it's valid. And like if I want to break dance, but I don't know how to break dance, but I have this clown nose, and I just throw myself on the floor and do this and like really commit and do a pose, I'm like, that's right. Like people will laugh and clap at that, because like clown was like, that's right, like I did it, like I did that, and like you can't tell me I didn't, because in my head I did it. You can't tell me if it was good or not, because like it was so good to me, and that's like why you're gonna want to celebrate. And that's like our children, right? Like children like go into something with full faith, like I've seen, like Lucy, I've seen like your children, right? Like they'll play like full force, like they'll just be like, they don't go halfway, they're like, what, you want me to jump out these stairs with my cape? Like I will do this, and I'm Superman, and I believe I can fly, and like best believe I can. And experience does not tell them that they can't fly, because like it's magic, and clown gives that. So how do you go to the edge, like Lucy? how do you go to the edge? Like, these are tools, right, where you actually are like, yeah, I believe I can fly. Like, I believe I can be on this edge, and this tool has like allowed me to fly. This is like hip hop, right? Like hip hop is that, like, you come up with like your own name, right? Like your MC name, like that's God. That's God. Like being like, yo, like you're this. And like when you say that name and when you call yourself that name, you give yourself permission to say whatever you're gonna say, especially if you're a freestyle MC and you're just gonna say it and you're not gonna judge yourself for it. And like those risks, like those tools, that culture that you like start respecting and gathering like to be tools for you are like what brings that healing, right? Like what brings that healing to like share that story. Like my friend Shanice said healing is not like it, while we were working through the play, like she said it one time, and then Shivani which was our marketing person was like, but she's like, healing is not linear. It's not this like yeah, cool, yeah, I'm healing, it's looking great, it's looking dandy. Like no, it's got like its ups and downs, and just when you think you're like, I'm so elevated, I'm so healed, like, you know, like spirit and creator will come, and you know, God and the universe will just be like, boom, another scenario, boom, another lesson. And then like it triggers your nervous system, it does things, this, that, another, you know, and then like you're having to be like, okay, well, that's a cycle, or it's a roller coaster. How do I deal with it? And that was kind of what that play was, right? Like, it was like, yes, we're gonna dance this cumbia song. I'm gonna take you to Cali, Colombia, and I'm gonna show you some things. And then the next scene, like, I'm gonna show you like some self-sabotaging, because one of the shadows that was just dancing with me and we were having fun, just wanted to go and like you know, do some self-sabotaging things and want to maybe cheat. And then like you're like, oh snap, and then guilt gets in the way, and then all this. And I was just having fun, like I was just dancing like a minute ago. Like Lady Clown was just like breakdancing like a minute ago. But now there's like now there's like something else that we must be looking at. So so like that kind of like stuff, like actually like looking at it is like so important. I will get to the spider woman spider. So like there was a time, like I think like 4 years ago, where I was like, yo, the secrets in my family, the ancestral secrets, some secrets are important, or like privacy is important, but like some secrets are like, yo, there's this web, and this web sometimes of secrets, and this web sometimes of lies, so you don't even know like what the like where the thread actually like started, and you have to like go back, like, and then some of those lies like are lies that you created, and some of those lies are inherited, like something like Eunice kind of like talk about like inherited lies. And so it's like, how, like, where is the web, like where does it go? And when I was described as like a spider, like I was like, oh, like I just always kind of saw it as like this kind of like negative thing. Like I saw the spider as like this kind of like, you know, kind of like mischievous, but also like, well, you know, like spiders will eat sometimes their own partners. Like there was like all these things that I was like, oh, like it doesn't sit well like with me. But when like the more I've been doing research into the spider and spider woman, from like my giving life course and my doula course, like spider woman's a weaver. Like spider women's are like the midwives and the doulas, and like the ones that like transition like us into like the spirit world, and like and they're like the regañonas that are like, yo, I can see this, like I can see this thread, and like you know, and it's like like spiders are like the bridge, right? Like they're bridges, right? And they're so important, because like even in community work, right, like spiders will continue to create their webs like to other little like other little places, and they're portals, like those webs are portals. And so like I've just been like embracing spider woman as like the ancestral like teaching that it brings, because looking at the webs of your ancestry, looking at the webs you've created, and us looking at each other as like, especially like as like femmes or women, or like life givers. A lot of like, also like a lot of like colonial stories, like especially in Latin America, a lot of like our indigenous myths got kind of like twisted into like colonial stories, where like the life givers in those myths were now life takers. And like a lot of like a lot of our stuff like has just been kind of like reprogrammed for us to forget how powerful we are. Like we are like some of us have like direct portals like to like life and death. Like that is like um like whether you identify as a woman or not, like it's like that is the body that you have, like that's like a portal. It's a portal that you have. And so like we're weavers. We're weavers, right? Like this is like matriarchs, right? Like matriarchs create communities. Like they feed the people, and nurture, right? And like bring people together, like, and food is like what brings people together. So like you literally like are like creating these communities by which like you're like, oh, here, okay, and you should know each other, and this, that, and so forth. So it's important to examine our trauma and to examine our stuff. And sometimes it doesn't, like sometimes you're like, oh, am I messing up, or like, or am I actually doing like what, you know, am I weaving the story? And sometimes it gets messy because like we're like we're wounded. but it's like so important more and more to get to either the root of the tree, or like the thread and the threads of being like, what story am I weaving for myself? So if we're sharing our stories and we're like, okay, yeah, this is like the story, but like the thing that Michelle has kind of said, right? Like where you've been talking about, like you're a writer, we're writers. You're not just writing like the thing with artists, like we're not just writing like a script, like a play, just like in the physical. Like we are writers, we are weavers, we are writing our story right now, right this instant. This is the chapter, like what we're like, where we are right now, like where like all of us, like Isabella, Lucy, Michelle, Eunice, and myself, like we at this moment we are writing a moment in our personal stories, and we are all like co-creators of this moment together, and we are all weaving the story together. We've all been like our own either Spider-Womans or however we want to, and we've like eventually weaved each other, like weaved like into one another. So it's important to continue on the search, and to look for the self that's speaking to us, because it's like it will speak to us. What's funny is that your shadows, even the wounded side of your shadows, will still I'm like, I feel like they make me do things I don't want to do, but sometimes they're just doing things to still get you to where you gotta be. So sometimes like you have to like understand that even the trauma and even the stuff is still guiding you to the people that you gotta be with, and where you gotta be, and the places that you gotta be. And even sometimes when you're like, oh, I don't feel like I'm in control of my destiny or my reality, because like I'm like having all these like sometimes these voices, or sometimes this impulse, and sometimes I don't know if it's actually self-destructive or healing. I think in doing this method, and like talking to my shadows and talking to myself and following my intuition more and more, and sometimes it looks like I'm destructing something, but maybe I'm actually like reweaving another narrative. And sometimes it looks aggressive, right? Like the shadow, like if I'm not conscious about it, it will subconsciously do that, and sometimes hurt people along the way. But if I am conscious about it, and I'm like, yo, this is what I'm doing, and I'm communicating with people, being like, hey, like these wounded sides of me are needing this. And I think that's the part, right? We sometimes want to shut those voices off, because we're like, no, like I need to be this perfect thing. I need to be this, you know, like I need to have my stuff together. Like, no, I'm not listening to that. But if you're not listening to it, the shadow will still come and embody you and still get you to do the thing that you still need to do, because you still need to get to like a certain truth. So I think what I've been like realizing more and more, and especially in the Spider Woman and the Weaver, is that regardless of we like our spirit got us, and regardless of like whether it looks like like unstable or not, it's just either your subconscious or your conscious actually creating. So it's like those sides of you will be like, okay, well, we could do it this way or we could do it that way, but either way we're gonna do it, because like our spirit still needs to get to this story. We're creating that story. So how would you like to weave that story? Would you like to weave it this way or that way? But either way we're gonna get to it, because it's like it's much bigger than us. We like to think that we're in control, but like our spirits are like, whoo, like much bigger, much bigger. Like our purpose is much bigger than like what we think it is, and like what society wants us to be in. That our purpose is much bigger than that. So I've been really focusing on like trust of the self, and understanding that like when I am curious about something, that my curiosity is leading me somewhere. And so now it's like, how do I remother my inner child to be like, okay, curiosity is great, and how what is it that you still need in order to guide you and make you feel safe and keep you safe in your curiosity, because like our curiosity can also like take us to like so how do I keep you safe in your curiosity to weave that story, and to weave that story with other weavers, to connect it, to create those portals, and if you are weaving, then you are creating portals. What kind of portals are you creating? And understand that even if you've created some portals that were like a little wonky, they were still those lessons, and they were meant to be there. They were meant to be part of your story. Yeah.
Yeah. Isabel, do you have anything you want to say? I want to talk about how we keep bringing up our methods, and I guess for the listeners to listen to that, a method that's been brought up: shadowing. What is shadows? Going to the spider, going to grief, liar. So shadows. What did you call it? It's shadow work.
Shadow work.
Yeah.
Shadow work. Okay, so shadow work. That's another method. Clown. That's another method as a medium. Metaphors, as Lucy mentioned. That's another method and a medium. Rituals. Finding the ritual and to getting to it, and that process. All of these are rituals. Michelle talked about we go into the edges, but also dance. You kept bringing up dance, and even as I see your body move, dance is another method in which to like communicate. And then the subconscious.
Finding other storytelling ways to, like just being a storyteller. I think that really resonated with me, of like the multifaceted nature of being a storyteller and what that encompasses, right?
All of which is just like talks about how do we just create our work out of curiosity, not letting the curiosity lead us to falling over the edge and then not being able to come back up, but being risk takers, but safe, but also risk takers in our work, and finding that spontaneity and life, and enriching life in it. Can we talk about that? How can we be risk takers and telling our stories, and again, you mentioned really awesome tools, but like safely being risk takers, and then also discussing about your mental health with your peers is another thing I want to talk about, and especially in a professional setting. How do you bring up your mental health with people you need to be professional with? Though theater is very personal and professional, like they mix the personal and professional. It's not really like that professional. It's very like we're all in this together in this weird thing and we're doing art. But then it's like this, all of a sudden, sometimes professionalism hits you and then someone directs something to you and they're like, this is the structure in which we need to do. But it's like, oh, okay, sorry. I didn't realize that I was now being unprofessional, you know? Yeah, can we talk? This was like 3 different thoughts. And Isabella, if you want to expand on that, yeah, professional and being unprofessional, but also being risk takers and discussing mental health in spaces that may not have give you room to talk about it, but you need to talk about it.
Mm.
Can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Okay, good. I want to unpack the word that you use, which is professional.
Mm.
And it's really weird, hey? This is what a lady was talking about, like the theater, doing your show in the theater and like colonial, right? And being professional, making money off your work. It's pressure, isn't it? To create this something that people are going to purchase and consume. And it creates these really strange and distorted expectations on your artwork. And I think it's weird because like in our form, we spend a lot of time rehearsing with each other, which is basically getting to know each other and hearing our stories. And there's no like pressure to create something because it's always improvised. But you're right, you know, people have this livelihood piece that they have to make, and then there's the creation piece. And I don't necessarily think they should be separated, but sometimes we kind of need a place that feels safe from those expectations. I don't know if it's always realistic in, you know, when you're in your careers and doing that thing, but I think something about the play space when you're playing needs that safety, that mothering that Lady was bringing up, is that we need a place that's safe to play. Like, just like how with my kids, you know, when they're young, I had to have a little like barrier around them so they wouldn't bonk their head. And then like, you know, now that my boys are older, they're like jumping, like literally jumping and flying. And then, you know, instead of me saying, no, don't stop, I put like cushions under them and like make sure that they don't bonk their heads. And like, some people would think that's like not a safe thing to do, but I allow my kids to take risks. And so I try to think of it the same way for myself. What are the cushions that I put underneath me so I can fall down and I can really practice falling and not bump my head. And I think there's an interesting part of witnessing, right? We get into this work to be witnessed, but also in the play space, we should get witnessed too. And so we kind of gather people that strengthen us. I think that's really key, you know? And then what's professional? Is it about making money, or professional is about maintaining relationships and treating people well, and also seeing them on their journey in what they want to create. So, you know, I know, Lady, you had some performers that joined with you. I loved jumping into your space and playing with you guys because it was so nice. It was just this energy of, we're here to do this honor Lady's story, but all those performers were also had something in it for themselves. Mm-hmm. They were going to get something out of, not like in terms of viewing, but they were going to learn something too. And I think that's professionalism as well. Mm-hmm. Is how am I respecting everyone's journey in this learning process? Mm-hmm. And, you know, we're not always going to be on the same path or goal of that learning process. And that's where maybe conflicts happen in like the professional setting. But I think if we keep in mind when we create a play space and to workshop ideas, is that everyone's input in the journey is really sacred, then we have all those cushions to fall. But I think sometimes what gets stuck for us is that when we're creating something, maybe it's a play that we didn't write or something, and we just have to fill the role, where maybe we're not getting a chance to play.
Yeah. Can I kind of jump in there, Lucy? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like it's interesting that you say that you like say that as like what is professional, right? because like, yeah, like that was definitely what that, I think what I wanted to create, like from my collective, is like like what people actually describe as like a safe space. You know, like actually having a little cocoon, like where we could like dive into some things. And like I brought Lucy in on certain occasions when it was like, hey, like these shadows are like, that's a lot to embody. Like you are embodying grief and faith, and like what is that like, you know, like what does that mean? And how are you dealing with grief and faith in your own body? And allowing people, right? So it's like in that moment, even though you are sharing my story, you're still embodying something. So therefore you're still sharing a part of your story, like what we just said, right? Like you're like, even if you didn't write it, you're still writing it. Like you're still a part of it. It is so deep that my friend Janet will have dreams of me when like my integrity and liar are being questioned. Like when the scenarios are happening, like after that play, she will like message me and be like, hey, I had a dream of you. And like that's like, I'm like, we should we should watch out with what we're creating. Like we're like manifesting some really like strong things. And then like when you are asking someone to be a part of your story, like just like that alone, right? Like she has dreams of me. Like we're now connected in the spirit world, in the dream world, in that way. Like and so like when you're talking about professional, like how are you bringing people into your story? How are you bringing people into your space? How are you taking care of them? Are you listening to them, right? Like are these when we're doing our check-ins, are you actually listening? Are you listening to the needs? Are you burning out? Like and are you, or are you able to hold space? Are people burning out? How are you able to hold space? That to me is way more important than if I answered an email on time. Is someone like, is someone tired and maybe they can't come to rehearsal, and even though like the show is the next day, but is someone like really really exhausted, and like what are we going to do about that, and how are we going to hold space for that, and how then are we going to trust and re-parent all of ourselves as a collective, right? My friend Vivian was like, this play and this process has given me hope that healing can happen in a communal setting, that can be communal, which a lot of us think it's an independent process. But the thing is that you can do a lot of work with yourself, but then like if you're not aligning, or other people are not aligning like alongside you, then like that's like you're kind of living like a constant state of trauma, like because then you're like aligning, and then like if those around you and like your company like is not, that can create some like wonky, you know, sort of things.
Could I hop onto that? Sorry, Vanessa. Could I hop onto when you talked about when your people who you're working with doesn't align with your vision as well? How do you tackle that a little bit? Because I'm not going to go into detail to my experience of that, but like doing a film versus doing live theater, completely two different worlds. And then working with someone who's a videographer versus working with someone who's like, I'm used to doing things live and feeling the moment and being present with thatness. And then when you don't see that, and then having it chopped up, you know, and having to chop up all your work and then to keep that narrative flowing, but then the vision, the alignment isn't there. What do you do about that?
Eunice, I'll just tell you that from the many experiences that I've had of that, flexibility is a compromise, and that can be a great thing to work on, and that can also be something to look at. When we talk about professional, and this is like no shade, because I am so grateful, like so grateful to the Fringe and to Murray and like to the whole team of like what that was. Like this is like not me. Like I feel like I've thrown shade in the past, but like because I was maybe like angry, but about some things, but they actually like really, I can really honestly say like they tried their best. Like they really tried their best to like accommodate all of my needs and wants. But your vision has to, like, if you're going to collaborate with people who haven't been part of your process from the beginning and who are like because like my collaboration was like, hi, I'm getting all these people together and we're going to do this different, right? Like Nasra and I both come from a theater background and we fought hard to not bring these colonial practices and to bring some things that were like tools, right? Like we're like, oh, we know this, but we're not going to do rehearsal this way. We're going to eat in our rehearsals and like we're going to feed people and we're going to do this and that, and like that's like so it's like your team has to be on the same vision as you. And if like your entire team, like that's why like for me it was like even box office. But the thing is that like if you don't have the experience and like even the wider picture of what that looks like, there's still things that seep in there because it's ingrained. It's not even sometimes people's fault. It's ingrained in them to want to control a narrative or want to control the way that something goes because they're following protocol, which is something huge. I've been like learning so much about like hospital births versus home births and like how like actually like most hospital births are based on protocol, whereas like home births like if you want to have a home birth where it's like more like traditional and like ceremonial, it's based on ceremony, it's based on like intuition. It's like the birther like can eat, like you should be eating like bone broth. That's like protocol in the hospital is like, we're not giving you that because like we already gave you something that might make you throw it up, which is like, so it's like when you are in institutions or when you are collaborating with people that are based on protocol and these things, right? We're talking about professionalism, talking about protocol. Protocol can be important, but protocol is often important based on just like saving people's asses. It's like very much it's very much based on like, okay, like that's like we have this protocol so that like you can stay safe within like your role that you have here. But intuition is something different. And it's like intuition can still follow a lot of these things in the protocol. But when everybody's on the same frequency about this project and you're all listening and you're all doing something, you can still get to those things and like still have like a professional and like really like enthusiastic and like core and divine and aligned process. But it like for me, what I've learned is that it has to be something by which you like select or like are very, I guess you're selective with like who your team is. But yeah. So it's I just think it's hard. I think it's going to be a compromise if you're not in complete, and we will have that as artists. I think we'll have that as artists. We will not be sometimes we might not always have control over our entire team. So it's just about looking at that. But yeah, it is accepting that flexibility is a compromise.
Mm-hmm. And I think that goes back to also like that spider of weaving, and you choose who you weave in, you choose like this weaving in and out. And if they want to leave a part of that silk, if they are a part of building this big web that's going to capture and land. So absolutely. I think we've talked so much, y'all, and I'm so grateful. I have learned so much from everyone, and I wish this conversation could last years, honestly. Like, just I could talk to y'all forever. But I before we go and before we wrap everything up, yes, Michelle.
Isabella, before we wrap up, I did want to introduce you guys to someone very quickly. This is a piece of the creation that I've recently had in visiting and connecting with my inner child, my ancestors, my God. And first I want to say conscious and unconscious traumas that are unresolved resurface in a family system. So sometimes we need to use our resources to go and get what might be lost, stolen, or forgotten. And this is who I connected with, who helped me to do that. Ooh, hello. My name is Anansi. Oh, do you not know me? Well, I am the story keeper. Oh, well, I had such a good time meeting you all today. Oh, I am so proud of all of you. I can fly again. Just watching you all. I must go now.
Hey.
Yes, yes. It's,
That's my connection. Thank you. Thank you.
thank you all so much. It's been such a pleasure for me to meet and talk about these things, because they need to be talked about, and we need to open up and take down these barriers and these walls that we have learned, and it's the process of unlearning. And so I am grateful for this learning that you have taught us today. Mm-hmm.
And thank you for everyone who's listened, everyone who's been here with us. We would like to say, extend that offer if Lady Vanessa, Michelle, is it Michelle Buckle? Am I saying it properly?
Yes.
Michelle Buckle and Lucy Liu, that these are people who you could reach out to if you'd like. These are people who can, if you want mentors, honestly ask for mentors. It's never, it's always necessary in these kind of steps to take for yourself as an artist, to reach out to your community, reach out to your elders. And yes, any closing thoughts that any of you have, we would love to hear it. Yeah, and then we'll say goodbye.
I realized that we didn't take some time to ground ourselves and acknowledge the land. So I'd like to take some time to do that. I think most of us are on Treaty 6. Yeah. Treaty 6 territory. I'd like to thank Pachamama Madre Tierra, Turtle Island, and this land, and the spirits of this land, the ancestors that are here that have also guided us. I'm gonna mention most of the names that I know. If someone else has also some names that they know, they can from Treaty 6. So Treaty 6, the Cree, the Cree or Nehiao, the Dene, Nakota Sioux, the Soto, the Métis, and I think I'm forgetting one more. Do Lucy or Michelle?
Blackfoot.
The Blackfoot. I think those are the ones that are part of the treaty. The nations that are part of the treaty, and I just like to recognize that the treaty is still part of the law. So we are, it is we are treaty people, and we are trying to we should do our roles, and I should do my role in learning more about the treaty and like how to honor it. Yeah, Miskwashi Weskahagen, Beaver Hill House, Beaver Hill. Yeah, I like to thank the beavers. I've seen some beavers recently at in the river valley, and like I'm really grateful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Just want to let everyone know to trust their process, and we want to create and produce, but I think sometimes, you know, even in this journey that we had together, it was the process of just kind of weaving through our stories, weaving through our questions, and generating more questions. I think this is what art is about, right? Just trusting our process. And I love all the teachings everyone shared with us today. I was so grateful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, yeah, trust the process. Thank you. Wow. Beautiful, all of you just here today. Thank you so much. You know, I've learned a lesson from the young, and I have to be grateful. And the lesson that I learned from all you today was just sitting here. And by sitting here and just...
Sound.
Oh, sorry, Michelle, you cut out.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're good.
Just sitting here and holding the space with all of you, that we all managed to weave everyone in, and that we didn't need to jump up front. We just needed to be present, to hold each other. But the most powerful lesson for me all is that by sitting here and listening, I saw my story unfold. I did not have to tell you a thing about Anansi and the story that was weaved. Everything that came out of your mouth, transpersonally, transcendently, it happened. If you come to my show, I'm not trying to brag and bring it up, Lucy will tell you, you just said everything from the spider, everything. I didn't have to do it for you. When we speak, we need to be careful. There's life and death in the tongue. Because when we speak as gifts that we have in writing, the many ways we speak, we will bring into fruition that which we want and what we don't want. So we are given this gift as story keepers and storytellers by just writing it, by just putting it out there, it begins to unfold. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Lovely, lovely. Thank you. Well, it was such a pleasure to talk with everyone. I feel like a part of my soul has kind of like, I have expelled. I've expelled some things, and I've expelled and taken. It's a give and take, and so thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it so much. I'm gonna hit the unrecord, like the stop recording now.
Keisha.
Thank you.